The vast emptiness of space surrounded the Crusade fleet. 27 ships drifted slowly, their normally bright engine lights now dim and flickering. On the command bridge of the largest vessel, the Voral, Captain Nara stared at the status reports with growing concern. "How much longer can we maintain life support?" she asked, her four eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of stress among her species. Officer Trell checked the figures again. 14 days at current power levels, Captain. Maybe 16 if we shut down non-essential sections. Captain Nara's gray skin paled slightly. 14 days to find a solution or watch her people, 8,000 refugees, die slowly in the cold vacuum of space. The fleet had been traveling for nearly a year, ever since their homeworld began its final death throes. They had hoped to reach the colony worlds in the Mendari system, but the unexpected gravitational anomaly had changed everything. "The engineering teams have tried everything," said Commander Vex, her second in command. "The propulsion crystals were completely shattered by the anomaly. Without them, we cannot generate the energy needed for faster-than-light travel." Nara nodded grimly. "And our distress signals?" No response, Communications Officer Xerath reported. "This sector appears uncharted. We may be the first to pass through this region." The bridge fell silent. Their situation was dire. The Caridians were not explorers but refugees, carrying what remained of their civilization after their sun had begun to expand unexpectedly. Scientists, families, artists, and workers, the last of their kind, all packed into these failing ships. "Captain," Xerath suddenly straightened at his console. "I'm detecting an unusual signal." Nara moved quickly to his station. "What kind of signal?" "It appears to be communications traffic. A lot of it. Coming from the nearby star system." Xerath's antenna twitched with excitement. The patterns suggest an advanced civilization. Hope and fear battled in Nara's mind. In their long journey, the Caridians had encountered 3 other spacefaring species. None had been friendly. The Voltar had fired upon them immediately. The Drex had demanded payment for safe passage. The Marin had simply ignored their pleas for help. "Could it be the Drex?" Commander Vex asked. Xerath shook his head. "No, the signal patterns are entirely unfamiliar. A species we haven't encountered before." Nara paced the bridge slowly. "We have no choice. Prepare the scout ship. We must investigate." 4 hours later, the fleet's fastest remaining vessel, barely larger than a shuttle, prepared to depart. Pilot Jax ran through the final checks while Science Officer Alara calibrated the sensors. "Remember," Captain Nara told them, "your mission is reconnaissance only. Determine if this species might help us, but do not reveal our full situation, unless absolutely necessary. We cannot risk another Voltar incident." Jax nodded grimly. 3 ships had been lost in that encounter. "May the stars guide you," Nara said, touching her forehead in the traditional blessing. The scout ship departed, its small engines pushing it toward the distant star. Behind it, the Caridian fleet continued to drift, their power reserves dropping with each passing hour. On the scout ship, Ilara monitored the increasing signal traffic as they approached the system. "It's remarkable," she told Jax. "The communications suggest a planet with billions of individuals. Their technology seems less advanced than ours in some ways, yet surprisingly sophisticated in others." Jax kept his focus on piloting. "Can you translate any of it?" "Not yet. Their language patterns are unlike anything in our databases, but I'm detecting regular space traffic in the system. This species has definitely achieved spaceflight." 3 days later, they reached the outer edges of the star system. 8 planets orbited the yellow star, but it was the 3rd planet that captured their attention. Blue and green, teeming with life and artificial satellites. "Look at all those orbital structures," Ilara said in wonder. "They must have hundreds of satellites and stations." A sudden alert sounded. "We're being scanned," Jax reported. "Something is approaching from the 4th planet. Fast." On their view screen, a vessel appeared, sleek and white with blue markings. It was smaller than their largest ships but clearly built for speed and maneuverability. Strange markings on its hull read, USS Dauntless. "They've detected us," Alara said unnecessarily. The alien ship adjusted its course, moving to intercept them. Jax tensed, ready to retreat. "Wait," Alara said. "They're broadcasting something." The communication system crackled with unfamiliar sounds, the alien language. Alara worked frantically at the translation matrix. I think they're greeting us," she said in surprise. The alien vessel now kept pace with them, maintaining a respectful distance. No weapons appeared to be active. "Should we respond?" Jax asked. Alara hesitated, then activated the universal greeting sequence, a mathematical pattern that any advanced species would recognize as artificial and deliberate. The response was immediate. The alien ship transmitted a similar sequence, followed by simple mathematical equations. They're establishing a communication baseline, Alara realized. They want to talk. Over the next several hours, the rudimentary communication developed. The aliens called themselves humans and their planet Earth. Their ship was part of something called United Space Fleet. "Remarkable," Alara said. "They've established a basic translation matrix in just hours. Their computational abilities are impressive." Eventually, simple messages could be exchanged. The humans requested permission to approach closer. After consulting with Captain Nara via long-range communication, Jax agreed. As the human ship drew, alongside they received a visual transmission. On their screen appeared a creature unlike any they had seen. Pinkish tan skin, only 2 eyes, and hair on top of its head. It wore a blue uniform with silver markings. "I am Captain Frank Miller, of the USS Dauntless," the creature said. The translation still rough but understandable. "On behalf of Earth, I welcome you to our solar system." Alara and Jax exchanged glances. The greeting seemed genuine, with none of the hostility they had come to expect from other species. "We are Caridians," Alara replied carefully. "I am Science. Officer Alara, we come in peace." "May I ask your purpose in our system?" Miller asked. Jax and Alara hesitated. Captain Nara had warned them to be cautious, but something about these humans seemed different. "We are scouts," Alara said finally. "Our fleet—" She stopped, unsure how much to reveal. "Your fleet?" Miller prompted. Alara took a deep breath. "Our fleet is stranded, damaged. We were passing through nearby space when we encountered an anomaly that disabled our propulsion systems." Miller's expression changed, showing what they would later learn was concern. "How many ships? How many people are affected?" 27 ships. 8,000 people, Jax said quietly. There was a brief consultation among the humans on their bridge. Then Miller faced them again. "Science Officer Alara, we would like to offer assistance. With your permission, we can rendezvous with your fleet and assess how we might help." Jax stared in disbelief. Alara's antenna quivered with surprise. "You would help us? Strangers?" she asked. Miller seemed confused by the question. "Of course, that's what people do." As the Dauntless prepared to follow them back to the stranded fleet, Alara sent an urgent message to Captain Nara. "We have made contact with a species called humans. They have offered help freely, with no demands. In all our travels, we have never encountered anything like them." The scout ship turned, leading the way back to the waiting fleet. For the first time in many months, they carried something precious with them. Hope. Captain Nara could hardly believe her eyes as the small human vessel approached her fleet. The USS Dauntless looked tiny next to the massive Caridian ships, yet it moved with confidence. On the main screen of the Voral's bridge, Captain Frank Miller's face appeared again, now speaking through a more refined translation system. "Captain Nara, we've completed our initial scans of your fleet. The damage is extensive, but we believe we can help." Nara's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as she studied the human. Their species looked so fragile. Soft skin, no protective scales or plates, only 2 eyes. Yet they had offered assistance without hesitation. "Captain Miller, we are grateful, but I must ask, What do you want in return? Miller seemed confused by the question. We don't require payment for humanitarian aid, Captain. That's not how we operate. The Caridian officers exchanged glances. Such behavior defied everything they had experienced in their journey. I've contacted Earth Command, Miller continued. 2 engineering vessels are already en route to our position. They should arrive within 48 hours. In the meantime, we'd like to send over some supplies and technical teams to assess your most critical systems. Nara hesitated. Allowing aliens aboard their vessels went against security protocols. Commander Vex leaned close. Captain, we don't know if we can trust them, he whispered. We have little choice, she replied quietly. Our life support systems will fail long before we can repair the ships ourselves. She turned back to the screen. We accept your offer, Captain Miller. 6 hours later, the first human shuttle docked with the Voral. The airlock cycled, and 5 humans in blue uniforms stepped onto the Caridian ship. Leading them was a woman with dark hair pulled back tightly. Chief Engineer Sofia Martinez, she introduced herself, making the human gesture of extending a hand, then awkwardly pulling it back when she realized the Caridians didn't share this custom. My team is ready to begin work immediately. Nara assigned Officer Trell to escort the humans. As they walked through the ship's corridors, many Caridians stopped to stare. Few had ever seen aliens up close, and none had seen humans before. In engineering, Martinez examined the damaged propulsion crystals with growing interest. Fascinating technology, she said, scanning the shattered components. These crystals channel energy in ways our science has only theorized about. Trell watched nervously. Can you repair them? Martinez shook her head. No, we don't have the ability to recreate these. But I think we might be able to adapt some of our technology to work with your systems. While the engineers worked, another human team led by a man named Alan Reyes distributed emergency supplies to the refugee ships. They brought food synthesizers, portable power units, and medical supplies. On the smallest ship, which housed mostly families with children, a human doctor named Lisa Wright discovered something unexpected. She was treating a young Caridian with respiratory distress when she noticed the child was fascinated by her hair. Would you like to touch it? She asked gently. The child reached out tentatively, touching the strange strands. Soon, other children gathered around, their fear of the aliens forgotten. By the end of the day, Wright had Caridian children following her everywhere, asking questions about Earth and humans. Back on the Voral, Captain Miller met with Captain Nara to discuss their situation more thoroughly. Your people are refugees, Miller said. It wasn't a question. Nara nodded slowly. Our home system's star became unstable. We had very little time to evacuate. These ships carry what remains of our civilization. And your destination? The Mendari system. We believed it had planets that could support our biology. But now... She gestured helplessly at the status reports. Miller was quiet for a moment. There may be suitable planets in Earth-controlled space. Once your ships are repaired, we could discuss settlement options. Nara stared at him in disbelief. You would share your territory with us? Just like that? Earth has several terraformed worlds with minimal populations. And frankly, Captain, we've been hoping to make peaceful contact with other intelligent species for generations. Your arrival, while unfortunate in circumstances, is something many humans would consider historic. Not everyone shared Miller's enthusiasm. In the ship's security section, Security Chief Verax watched the humans with suspicion. He had served in the military before the evacuation and had seen what desperate species could do to each other. They must have some hidden motive, he told his deputy. No species helps another without benefit to themselves. Perhaps their benefit is diplomatic, his deputy suggested. An alliance with us? Varax snorted. What could they gain from allying? With homeless refugees, no, they want our technology. Those propulsion crystals, even damaged, they're more advanced than anything these humans have. On the second day, the engineering ships USS Horizon and USS Venture arrived. They were larger than the Dauntless, clearly designed for complex repair operations. With them came more engineers, led by a man named Peter Daniels. Daniels met with Martinez, and together they presented their plan to Captain Nara. "We can't repair your crystals," Daniels explained, "but we believe we can create a hybrid system using our fusion technology linked to your existing energy network. It won't be as efficient as your original drives," Martinez added, "but it should give your ships enough power for both life support and limited propulsion." "How limited?" Nara asked. "You won't achieve faster-than-light travel," Daniels admitted. "But you could reach the nearest habitable planet in our system within 2 months. Communications Officer Zirith had been working closely with the humans on translation and cultural exchange. He stepped forward now. "Captain, I've been studying their star charts. They have a planet called New Terra that appears compatible with our biology. The humans have only established a small research station there. It's a terraforming project still in its early stages," Miller explained. "But the atmosphere and gravity are already within parameters that should be comfortable for your people." Commander Vex looked skeptical. "And Earth would just give us this planet?" "Not give," Miller clarified. "Share. We propose a joint colony. Your people have agricultural techniques that could be valuable on a developing world, according to what Officer Zirith has shared with us." The proposal spread quickly through the fleet. For the first time since leaving their homeworld, the refugees had real hope. Children who had known nothing but ship corridors their whole lives asked their parents what a sky looked like. But in the lower decks of the Voral, Security Chief Varax gathered his most trusted officers. "We cannot trust these humans so easily," he told them. "If their technology can power our ships, then we should take it by force if necessary. Once we have what we need, we can find our own planet, away from alien influence." One of his officers looked troubled. "But they've shown no hostility." "Not yet," Varax replied. "But history teaches us that no good comes from depending on the mercy of strangers." As work on the hybrid propulsion system continued, no one noticed Varax's officers quietly studying the human technology, making their own plans. The future of both species might depend on whose vision prevailed. Work on the hybrid propulsion system progressed quickly. The human engineers had set up a temporary workshop in the largest cargo bay of the Voral. Caridian technicians gathered around, watching with growing interest as the humans assembled strange equipment. Engineer Sofia Martinez directed the operation, her hands moving confidently over the complex components. Beside her worked technician Relk, the most senior of the Caridian engineers. "Your approach is unlike anything I've seen," Relk admitted, watching Martinez connect a fusion regulator to a Caridian power conduit. "We would never have considered using magnetic containment fields in this way," Martinez smiled. "Sometimes fresh eyes see different solutions. Your crystal technology is far more elegant than our fusion systems, but we have to work with what we have." Nearby, Peter Daniels instructed a mixed team of humans and Caridians on calibrating the energy flow between the two technologies. Despite the language barrier, they developed a system of hand signals and simple diagrams to communicate technical concepts. On the third day, Captain Nara invited Captain Miller and his senior officers to share a meal in the Voral's community hall. It was the first formal social exchange between the species. The humans had brought food from their ship, while the Caridians prepared simple dishes from their dwindling supplies. "Our medical team has confirmed your food is safe for us," Miller said, carefully trying a purple paste that Caridians considered a delicacy. Surprisingly compatible biology. Dr. Lisa Wright sat next to a Caridian elder named Sora, who had been a teacher before the evacuation. "The children are adapting quickly to your presence," Sora told her. "They call you the soft ones because of your hair," Wright laughed. "On our world we have animals called cats with fur much softer than our hair. The children would love them." "Will there be these cats on New Terra?" asked a small voice. A young Caridian child had been listening nearby. "I don't know," Wright said kindly. "But if not, perhaps we could bring some someday." The child nodded seriously before being called away by its parent. "They have known nothing but these ships their entire lives," Sora explained sadly. "A planet, with open spaces and natural light. It is hard for them to even imagine. In another section of the hall, communications officer Xerath and the human linguist Olivia Grant were deep in conversation. They had spent days working together on improving the translation system. "Your language is fascinating," Grant told him. "The way you use tonal shifts to indicate emotional context. It's similar to some Earth languages, but much more complex." "Yet you learned it so quickly," Xerath noted. "Your species has a remarkable facility for communication." Grant shrugged. "Necessity. Earth has thousands of languages. Learning to communicate across barriers is something we've had to master." The meal was interrupted when Engineer Martinez hurried into the hall, her face glowing with excitement. She approached the captain's table. "We've done it," she announced. "The first test of the hybrid system was successful. We can begin installing the units on all ships within 2 days." A cheer went up from the assembled Caridians. For many, it was the first hopeful news in months. Security Chief Verax watched from a corner, his expression unreadable. When the celebration died down, he approached Captain Nara. "May I speak with you privately, Captain?" Nara nodded and they moved to a quiet area of the hall. "I believe we should reconsider our options," Verax said in a low voice. "Now that we understand the human technology, we could adapt it ourselves. We don't need to follow them to their planet." Nara's 4 eyes narrowed. "What are you suggesting, Security Chief?" "Simply that we thank them for their help, then set our own course once repairs are complete. The Mendari system is still an option." "The Mendari system is 6 months away at the speeds these hybrid engines can manage," Nara reminded him. "Our supplies won't last that long." "Then we take what we need from the humans," Verax said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They have resources. Their ships carry food, medicine, tools." "Enough," Nara cut him off. "We are not raiders, Verax. We are refugees seeking a new home. The humans have offered us sanctuary with no conditions. We will not repay their kindness with theft." Verax stiffened. "I am thinking of our people's future, Captain. Can we truly trust these aliens? What if their hospitality turns once we reach their territory? We would be at their mercy." Nara looked across the room at the humans and Caridians working side by side. "I believe we can trust them, and even if there is risk, we will face it with honor." The next morning, installation of the hybrid propulsion systems began on all 27 ships. Human and Caridian work teams moved between vessels, coordinating the complex operation. The mood throughout the fleet was lighter than it had been since the evacuation from their homeworld. On the smallest ship, the nursery vessel, Technician Relk and Engineer Martinez worked together to modify the energy distribution system. "These conduits are more delicate than the others," Relk explained. "This ship was designed for families, not long-distance travel." Martinez nodded, carefully adjusting her approach. As they worked, a small group of Caridian children gathered to watch. One of them, braver than the rest, approached Martinez. "Will your machine make the lights stop flickering?" the child asked. Martinez smiled. "That's the plan. And it should. Make the air cleaner, too." The child considered this. "My parent says we'll see a sky soon. A real one, not just pictures." "That's right," Martinez said. "New Terra has a beautiful sky. Blue, like Earth's, but with hints of purple at sunset." The child's eyes widened at the concept. Unknown to them, in the cargo bay of the Voral, 3 security officers loyal to Verax were studying the hybrid propulsion designs. They had copied the plans while pretending to assist with inventory. "Humans store additional fusion components on their engineering vessel," one of them reported. "If we could access them, we could potentially build more units ourselves." Verax nodded slowly. "Continue monitoring their activities. Learn everything you can about their technology, but take no action yet." That evening, Captain Miller received a message from Earth Command. His communications officer, a young man named Jason Beck, delivered the news. "Sir, we've been authorized to escort the Caridian fleet to New Terra. A diplomatic team will meet us there to formalize the settlement agreement." Miller smiled. "Excellent. Inform Captain Nara immediately." As Jason headed to the shuttle bay, he passed the engineering team returning from their day's work. They looked tired but satisfied. "The installations are almost complete," Martinez reported when she saw him. "Another day, maybe two." But as she spoke, the lights throughout the ship suddenly flickered. A moment later, alarms began to sound. "What's happening?" Jason asked. Martinez was already checking her equipment. "Something's wrong with the main power grid. The solar monitoring system is showing massive flare activity from the local star. Outside, the normally placid yellow star they had been orbiting was erupting with energy. A massive solar flare, many times larger than predicted, was heading directly toward the vulnerable fleet. The massive solar flare raced toward the fleet, a wall of deadly radiation and charged particles. On the bridge of the Voral, alarms sounded as Officer Trell reported the situation. "Impact in 17 minutes. Our shields can't withstand this level of radiation." Captain Nara turned to Captain Miller, who had been on the Voral for a status meeting when the alarms began. "Can your ships withstand this?" Miller shook his head grimly. "Not completely. Our shields are better against radiation, but the electromagnetic pulse will damage our systems too." He activated his communicator. "All human vessels, this is Captain Miller. Emergency Protocol Sierra 9. Move to shield positions around the Caridian refugee ships. Priority to the nursery vessel." Without hesitation, the 3 human ships moved to protective positions. The USS Dauntless positioned itself above the nursery ship, while the engineering vessels spread out to cover as many Caridian ships as possible. "What are they doing?" Commander Vex asked in confusion. "They're using their ships as shields," Nara realized, her voice filled with disbelief. Miller was already coordinating with his crew. "Martinez, what's the status of the hybrid propulsion systems?" Engineer Martinez's voice came through the communicator. 6 ships have fully operational systems. The others are in various stages of installation. Can any of them move? Maybe 3 or 4 could manage emergency propulsion, but not far and not fast. Miller turned to Nara. "We need to move as many people as possible to the ships with working engines. They should move behind the local moon for protection." Nara immediately began issuing orders. "Begin emergency evacuation of ships without propulsion. Priority to children and elders." Throughout the fleet, chaos erupted as Caridians rushed to gather essential belongings. Human crew members helped guide them to shuttles and transport vessels. On the nursery ship, Dr. Wright organized the evacuation of the children. "Stay together, hold hands in pairs," she called over the noise as small Caridians clutched their few possessions. In engineering, Martinez and Relk worked frantically to stabilize the power grid on the Voral. "If the main power core overloads during the flare, the radiation will breach containment," Relk explained, his hands moving quickly over the controls. "We need to create a bypass," Martinez said. "Channel the surge away from the critical systems." Security Chief Verax suddenly appeared with 4 of his officers. "What's happening?" he demanded. Martinez didn't look up from her work. "Solar flare headed our way. We're trying to prevent a core breach." Verax studied the situation, then made a decision. "My team will help. We've studied your technology." Martinez glanced at him in surprise, then nodded. "We need to reroute these power conduits. Can your people handle the junction boxes on level 3? "Yes," Verax said. "Zer and Kelv, go." 2 of his officers rushed off to help. For now, at least, their suspicions were set aside in the face of a common threat. On the bridge, the countdown continued. "Flare impact in 8 minutes, Trell announced. Communications Officer Zereth turned from his console. "Captain, I'm receiving reports that the evacuation vessels can't reach all the ships in time." Nara's heart sank. Some of her people would face the flare with minimal protection. "The nursery ship is fully evacuated," Zereth continued. "But ships 12 through 17 have no transport capacity." Captain Miller stepped forward. "Our shuttles can reach them. Beck, coordinate with the Dauntless. Launch all available shuttles to ships 12 through 17. "But sir," Beck protested, "if our shuttles are away from our ships during the flare, they'll be badly damaged," Miller finished. "I know. Do it anyway." Human shuttles launched, from all 3 vessels racing against time to reach the unprotected Caridian ships. Inside the Caridian vessels, frightened refugees watched through viewports as the small human craft approached. On Ship 15, a family huddled together as the airlock opened and 2 human pilots rushed in. "We can take 12 per trip." One called through the translation device. "Quickly!" In engineering, Martinez and Relk had completed their bypass when an energy surge hit the Voral. "That's just the leading edge," Martinez warned. "The main flare is still coming." Relk checked the readouts. "The bypass is holding, but just barely. We need more power to maintain the magnetic containment field." Varax, who had been helping stabilize the power relays, looked up. "The weapons systems, they have independent power cells we could repurpose." Martinez nodded. "Good thinking. Can you access them?" "Yes, but I'll need authorization from Captain Nara." When contacted, Nara didn't hesitate. "Do it. Survival is our priority now." With 4 minutes until full impact, the evacuation continued. 3 Caridian ships with functioning propulsion had moved behind the moon, carrying hundreds of refugees. Human shuttles ferried more to the larger vessels with stronger shields. On the bridge of the Voral, Miller received a call from the captain of the USS Horizon. "Sir, we've got a problem. Our primary shield generator is fluctuating. We can't maintain protection over ships 21 and 22. Miller turned to Nara. "How many people on those ships?" "Over 300, she replied, her voice tight with worry. Without hesitation, Miller opened a channel to his ship. "Dauntless, this is Captain Miller. Adjust position to cover ships 21 and 22. "But sir," came the response, "that would leave the Voral partially exposed." "That's an order, Lieutenant. The Voral has the bypass system in place, those other ships don't." As the Dauntless moved to protect the vulnerable ships, Miller caught Nara watching him. "You're risking your ship," she said quietly. "We're risking all our ships," he replied simply. "That's what we do." In the final minute before impact, Varax and his team successfully connected the weapon power cells to the containment field generators. Martinez monitored the readings as energy levels stabilized. "It's working," she called out. "Containment fields at 93%. Across the fleet, humans and Caridians braced for impact. Children from the nursery ship, now safely aboard, one of the ships behind the moon, huddled together with their caretakers. "What will happen to the soft ones?" one child asked Sora, the elder teacher. Sora had no answer. She simply held the children close and waited. The flare hit with tremendous force. The human ship's shields glowed brilliant blue as they absorbed the brunt of the radiation. Inside the vessels, systems sparked and failed as the electromagnetic pulse washed over them. On the Voral, the lights flickered and died, plunging the ship into darkness before emergency power engaged. In engineering, Martinez and Relk fought to maintain the bypass as consoles exploded around them. "Reroute through secondary systems," Relk shouted over the noise. Varax pulled an injured human engineer to safety as a power conduit burst nearby. The security chief's skepticism had been replaced by urgent cooperation in the face of disaster. After 3 minutes of intense bombardment, the worst of the flare passed. Damage reports began flooding in from all vessels. On the bridge of the Voral, emergency lights cast an eerie glow as Captain Nara surveyed the situation. Communications were down. Life support was functioning at minimal levels, but they had survived. Beside her, Captain Miller was attempting to contact his ships. "Dauntless, do you read? Horizon? Venture?" After a long moment of static, a voice broke through. "Dauntless here, Captain. We're still here. Shields at 12%, multiple systems down." Miller closed his eyes briefly in relief. "Casualties?" "Assessment ongoing, sir. But we're alive." As systems gradually came back online, the true scope of what had happened became clear. The human ships had taken the worst of the damage, their hulls scorched and systems severely compromised. But they had saved thousands of Caridian lives. In the engineering section, Martinez helped Relk to his feet. Both were injured but alive. "Your people," Relk began, his voice filled with wonder. "You barely knew us, yet you risked everything." Martinez shrugged, wincing at the pain from a burn on her shoulder. "That's what humans do when others need help." Varax approached them slowly. The security chief looked at Martinez with new eyes. "I was wrong about your species," he admitted. "I thought you had hidden motives." Martinez managed a tired smile. "Our motive is pretty simple, actually. We believe everyone deserves help when they need it." As the fleet began recovery operations, something had fundamentally changed. The Caridians no longer saw the humans as strange aliens or potential threats, but as allies who had proven their worth in the most dire circumstances. And the journey to New Terra was just beginning. The journey to New Terra took 63 days. After the solar flare, both human and Caridian ships needed extensive repairs before they could travel. The hybrid propulsion systems had been damaged but not destroyed, and with careful work, the engineers restored them to working condition. Captain Nara stood on the observation deck of the Voral, watching as a blue-green planet grew larger in the viewscreen. New Terra. After more than a year in space, after losing their homeworld and nearly dying in the endless void, her people had found a new beginning. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. Beside her, Captain Frank Miller nodded. "The terraforming is only about 30% complete, but the southern continent is already quite habitable. Forests, rivers, grasslands, plenty of space for everyone." Over the past 2 months, the relationship between the two species had transformed. What began as a rescue had become a partnership. Throughout the fleet, humans and Caridians had worked side by side, sharing knowledge, solving problems, and even forming friendships. "My people have lived in ships for so long," Nara said. "Many of our children have never stood under an open sky. They don't know what rain feels like." Miller smiled. "They'll learn. And they'll teach us things too. Your agricultural science is decades ahead of ours." On the nursery ship, now flying close to the Voral, Dr. Lisa Wright was helping the children prepare for their new home. She had been showing them pictures of earth animals, plants, and landscapes to prepare them for life on a planet. "Will there be dangers?" one child asked, its 4 eyes wide with concern. "Some," Wright answered honestly. "But nothing we can't handle together. Your parents and our scientists have already made plans to keep everyone safe." In engineering, Martinez and Relk were making final adjustments to the Voral's landing systems. Since the solar flare, they had become an inseparable team, with Relk's deep knowledge of Caridian technology complementing Martinez's human ingenuity. "I still can't believe you managed to convert our atmospheric entry shields to work with your technology," Relk said, shaking his head in admiration. Martinez grinned. "And I can't believe how quickly you learned our computer systems. We make a good team." Security Chief Varax entered the engineering section, nodding respectfully to both of them. The crisis had changed him profoundly. Where once he saw threats and deception, he now saw possibilities. He had become one of the strongest advocates for human-Caridian cooperation. "The landing teams are ready," he reported. "First groups will establish the base camp. Weather conditions are favorable." As New Terra filled more of the view screen, excitement spread throughout the fleet. For the humans, this was a historic moment. The first peaceful settlement with an alien species. For the Caridians, it was salvation, a second chance for their civilization. The fleet entered orbit, and the first shuttles prepared to descend. Captain Nara insisted on being among the first to land, along with a mixed group of human and Caridian specialists who would begin setting up the colony. As her shuttle broke through the cloud layer, Nara pressed her face to the window. Below, vast forests spread out in all directions, interrupted by winding rivers and open meadows. In the distance, snow-capped mountains rose against a sky tinged with purple, just as Martinez had described to the children. The shuttle touched, down in a large clearing. The door opened, and for the first time in many months, Nara felt natural gravity, breathed non-recycled air. Cautiously, she stepped onto the soil of her people's new home. The air was cooler than their homeworld had been, the gravity slightly stronger, but it felt right. Around her, humans and Caridians emerged from the shuttle, many of the Caridians hesitating before taking their first steps on planetary ground. Over the next week, more shuttles arrived, bringing people and supplies. Engineers from both species worked together to build the first structures, temporary shelters that would house everyone until permanent buildings could be constructed. Captain Miller directed the human effort, while Nara coordinated her people. They established a joint council to address the many questions of building a shared colony: land distribution, governance, resource management, and cultural integration. 2 weeks after the first landing, a special shuttle arrived. The youngest, Caridian children, those who had never known life outside the nursery ship, were finally coming to their new home. Dr. Wright and Sora, the elder teacher, had prepared them as best they could, but nothing could truly ready them for the experience. The children stepped out of the shuttle. Their reactions brought tears to many eyes. Some froze in fear at the openness, clutching each other for support. Others immediately ran forward, wanting to touch the grass, the trees, the flowing water of a nearby stream. "It's so big," one child cried, spinning in circles with arms outstretched. "Look up," another shouted, pointing at birds soaring overhead. Earth species introduced during the early terraforming. Varak stood watching the children, his usual stoic expression softened. One of the human officers, Jason Beck, from the Dauntless, approached him. "Quite a sight, isn't it?" Beck said. Varak nodded. "When we left our homeworld, I feared these children would never know anything but metal walls and artificial light. I feared our culture would die in the void of space." He turned to the human. "Your people changed everything for us." Beck shrugged. "Anyone would have helped?" "No," Varak said firmly. "Not anyone. In our journey, we encountered 3 other spacefaring species. None offered aid. One attacked us. Another demanded payment we couldn't provide. The third simply ignored our distress calls." He looked back at the playing children. Only humans stopped to help strangers in need. 6 months later, the colony was thriving. The first permanent buildings had been constructed in a style that blended human and Caridian architectural elements. Fields of Caridian crops grew alongside Earth vegetables, the alien agricultural techniques proving remarkably effective on New Terra's soil. In the center of the settlement, a monument had been erected, a simple stone pillar with inscriptions in both human and Caridian languages. It told the story of a fleet stranded in space and the humans who came to help. Captain Nara often visited this monument in the early mornings. On one such day, she found Engineer Martinez already there, looking up at the inscription. "The children have added their own tribute," Nara said, pointing to small handprints, both human and Caridian, pressed into the base of the monument. Martinez smiled. "They're growing up together. No fear, no suspicion, just friendship." "And tomorrow the Joint Research Center opens," Nara added, "our scientists working together to combine our technologies." In orbit above New Terra, the USS Dauntless prepared to depart. Captain Miller would return to Earth to report on the colony's progress and bring back more supplies. But many of the human crew had chosen to stay, finding a new purpose in helping build this unprecedented cooperation between species. As the sun set on New Terra, casting purple and gold light across the settlement, Caridian children played alongside. The few human children who had come with their parents, they ran through fields under an open sky, something that once seemed impossible. And far beyond their solar system, other alien civilizations received reports of this strange partnership. Many dismissed it as temporary or strategic. But a few began to reconsider their isolation, wondering if perhaps there was something special about these humans after all, a species that would stop to help strangers stranded among the stars. The hallways of the Confederation flagship Eternal Harmony gleamed with an unnatural perfection that still made Captain Frank Miller uncomfortable even after 3 years aboard. The massive vessel housed representatives from over 50 alien species, but Frank often felt more alone here than he ever had back on Earth. He straightened his blue diplomatic uniform as he approached the large doors to the War Council chamber. The guards, tall, four-armed Jurians with scaled skin that shimmered under the soft lighting, stared at him with their usual mixture of distrust and curiosity. "Captain Miller," the guard on the left said, "you understand the observation protocols?" Frank nodded. He understood them all too well. I will not speak unless directly addressed. I will not offer tactical suggestions. I am present only as Earth's mandated witness." The words tasted bitter in his mouth. The door slid open, revealing a circular room with a massive holographic display in the center. Around it stood or floated the military leaders of the Galactic Confederation's primary species. Frank took his assigned seat at the far edge of the room, the one with the poorest view of the tactical display. Lieutenant Kate Walsh was already there, her red hair pulled back in a tight bun, her face carefully neutral. But Frank knew her well enough to see the tension in her shoulders. She had been the youngest tactical officer ever to graduate from the North American Military Academy, and being relegated to silent observer status was a constant frustration. "They're losing," she whispered as Frank sat beside her. "The Vraxians took Outpost Delta 9 yesterday," Frank replied quietly. 3,000 Confederation troops dead or captured. The holographic display flickered and changed to show the current battle lines. The Vraxian Empire's forces, represented by red markers, had pushed deep into Confederation space in just 3 months of fighting. Blue Confederation positions were rapidly retreating from the outer systems. Admiral Genthar, the 7-foot-tall Arcturian who served as Supreme Commander of Confederation forces, raised one of his 4 hands for silence. His skin, the color of burnished copper, seemed duller than usual. Frank recognized the signs of stress. "The Vraxian advance continues unabated," Genthar announced. "Their 3rd Fleet has broken through our defenses at the Regulus sector. We anticipate an attack on the Sirius Junction within 15 standard days." A murmur went through the assembled leaders. If the Vraxians took the Sirius Junction, they would have direct access to the Confederation's core worlds. Frank felt Kate shift beside him. She was writing something on her datapad. He glanced down and saw a simple tactical diagram showing how the Confederation forces could reposition to create a trap at Sirius. It was brilliant, it was obvious, and it was something they couldn't share. "We will reinforce our position at Sirius with the 4th and 7th Fleets," Admiral Genthar continued. "We will maintain our standard defensive formation and repel their advance." Frank bit his tongue. The standard defensive formation had failed 6 times already against the Vraxians' flanking maneuvers. Kate's hand tightened around her stylus until her knuckles turned white. Commander Loxarian, a gelatinous being from one of the water worlds, pulsed with blue light as it spoke. "Perhaps we should consider alternative strategies. Our current approach has not been effective." "What alternatives do you suggest?" asked General Vryn of the Pleiadian Guard, her feathered crest rising in irritation. "The humans," Loxarian began, then paused as the room went silent. Every eye, ocular sensor, and sensory appendage turned toward Frank and Kate. The humans have experience with this type of warfare. Perhaps their input would be valuable. General Vryn's feathers flattened against her skull. "We all remember why humans were banned from participating in Confederation military actions. Do you wish to repeat the Luna incident?" Frank remained expressionless, though the mention of Luna made his stomach clench. One human ship, the UES Defiant, had managed to defeat 3 Pleiadian cruisers by executing a maneuver so reckless that no alien commander would have considered it possible. The human captain had used her own damaged vessel to knock an asteroid into the path of the Pleiadian ships. The resulting collision had killed over 200 Pleiadians and turned the tide in humanity's first and last interstellar battle. "That was 50 years ago," Loxarian countered, "and we are losing this war." Admiral Genthar raised his hand again. "The ban on human military participation was unanimously approved by the Security Council. It cannot be overturned in this chamber. We will proceed with the established strategy." The meeting continued for another hour, with various commanders reporting on their sectors and receiving their orders. Frank and Kate dutifully recorded everything, though they knew their reports back to Earth would change nothing. Humanity was part of the Confederation but excluded from its defense. As the meeting ended and the commanders filed out, Frank was surprised to feel a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Admiral Genthar standing behind him. "Walk with me, Captain Miller," the Admiral said, his deep voice quieter than usual. Frank nodded to Kate, who looked as surprised as he felt. and followed the tall alien into a small side chamber. The door closed behind them with a soft hiss. "Speak freely, Captain," Genthar said, his 4 violet eyes focused intently on Frank's face. "What do you think of our strategy?" Frank hesitated, unsure if this was some kind of test. "Sir, I'm not permitted to offer tactical assessments. I am not asking officially." The Admiral's voice had an edge of desperation Frank had never heard before. "I am asking as one military man to another. What would humans do in this situation?" Frank took a deep breath. "We would not mass our forces at Sirius Junction, sir. That's exactly what the Vraxians expect. And what would you do instead?" "We would set a trap, but not the one they're expecting." Frank found himself explaining Kate's plan from the datapad, the words rushing out after being held back for so long. "The Vraxians rely on their superior numbers. We'd use that against them." Genthar listened silently, his expression unreadable. When Frank finished, the Admiral was quiet for a long moment. "Interesting," he finally said. "Very interesting." A distant alarm sounded and Genthar straightened. "I must go. Thank you for your unofficial input, Captain." As the Admiral left, Frank stood alone in the small chamber, his heart racing. For the first time in 3 years, someone had actually asked for his opinion. When he returned to their small office, Kate was already compiling their daily report. "What did he want?" she asked without looking up. "He wanted to know what humans would do," Frank replied, still hardly believing it himself. Kate's head snapped up, her green eyes wide. "And you told him?" Frank nodded. "I told him everything." "Do you think it will make any difference?" Before Frank could answer, their communication console chimed with an urgent message. The Vraxian Third Fleet had destroyed the Confederation outpost at Proxima Centauri. The path to Sirius Junction was now wide open. "It has to," Frank said quietly. "Otherwise, this war is already lost." The emergency meeting of the Confederation Security Council was already in full swing when Frank and Kate arrived. They stood at the back of the large chamber, watching alien diplomats argue loudly about the latest Vraxian victories. 3 fleets, destroyed in less than a week, said Representative Korn, a small avian being whose feathers were ruffled in distress. The Sirius Junction could fall any day now. Admiral Genthar stood at the center of the chamber, his copper skin now looking almost gray with exhaustion. "Our conventional tactics have failed against the Vraxian advance. We must consider alternatives." The room went quiet. Frank felt his heart rate quicken. "What alternatives?" asked Ambassador Lyrixian of the Phaedon Republic. The tall, thin alien's translucent skin revealed the rapid flow of blue fluid through his veins, a sign of agitation in his species. Admiral Genthar's 4 violet eyes briefly found Frank at the back of the room. "I propose we formally consult with human military experts, not as combatants but as strategic advisors." The chamber erupted in protests. Ambassador Lyrixian's voice rose above the others. "Have you forgotten the Luna incident? 1 human ship defeated 3 of our cruisers by crashing an asteroid into them. Their tactics are reckless and unpredictable." "Their tactics are effective," Genthar countered, "and at this moment, effectiveness is what we need." Kate leaned close to Frank. "Is this really happening?" she whispered. "I think my conversation with the Admiral made an impression," Frank replied quietly. The debate continued for hours. Frank and Kate stood silently, protocol forbidding them from speaking unless directly addressed. Finally, a vote was called. By the narrowest margin possible, the Council approved the formation of a human advisory unit with severe restrictions. Their recommendations would be reviewed by Confederation Command before implementation, and humans would remain prohibited from direct combat. As the Council members filed out, Admiral Genthar approached Frank and Kate. "Captain Miller, Lieutenant Walsh, report to my command center in 1 hour. Bring your tactical assessments. All of them." Exactly 1 hour later, Frank and Kate entered the Admiral's private command center. They were surprised to find 2 other humans already there. General Lisa Ortega and Commander Daniel Blackwood had been secretly transported from Earth at the Admiral's request. Lisa Ortega was a legend, the architect of the unified Earth defense strategy that had impressed the Confederation during first contact. Her dark hair was streaked with gray, but her eyes were sharp and alert. Daniel Blackwood was younger, with a reputation as Earth's most brilliant naval tactician. Captain, Lieutenant. General Ortega nodded at them. Seems we're finally being asked to the dance. Admiral Genthar gestured to the large tactical display, showing the current state of the war. The red markers of Vraxian forces had pushed alarmingly close to the center of Confederation space. We have limited time, the Admiral said. The Vraxians will reach Sirius Junction within days. I need your assessment and recommendations immediately. For the next several hours, the 4 humans reviewed battle data and identified critical weaknesses in Confederation tactics, predictable attack formations, reluctance to sacrifice resources, and inflexible command structures. The problem is fundamental, Commander Blackwood explained, pointing to recordings of previous battles. Your ships always maintain formation, even when breaking formation would save them. Your commanders follow the same tactical doctrines in every situation. The Vraxians have figured out your playbook, Kate added. They know exactly what you'll do before you do it. General Ortega stepped forward. We need to change the game entirely, something the Vraxians won't expect. What do you propose? Admiral, Genthar asked. First, stop moving your fleets as single units, Frank said. Break them into smaller, more agile groups that can attack from multiple vectors. Second, Kate continued, use your civilian mining vessels to create traps. Those ships can deploy explosive ore fragments in nebula zones where Vraxian sensors are compromised. Blackwood pointed to a specific sector on the map. Third, start leaking false information about your fleet positions. Make them think you're somewhere you're not. Admiral Genthar looked troubled. These suggestions violate centuries of Confederation, military doctrine. That's exactly why they'll work, General Ortega said firmly. The Vraxians have studied your doctrine too. They're counting on you to follow it. Their discussion was interrupted by an urgent communication. The Vraxian forces had broken through the last defense line before Sirius Junction. The path to the Confederation's core worlds was now open. The Admiral's face hardened. I must present your recommendations to the Council immediately. An emergency session was called. Frank, Kate, Ortega, and Blackwood stood at attention as Admiral Genthar outlined their strategy to the assembled representatives. The reaction was immediate and negative. Sacrificing ships as decoys, intentionally leaking information, using mining vessels as weapons. Ambassador Larixian was practically vibrating with indignation. These tactics are dishonorable. They will save lives, Admiral Genthar responded. Both military and civilian. The Vraxians don't fight with honor, General Ortega added when directly addressed by the Council. They fight to win. So should you. Before the Council could vote, another emergency alert sounded. The Vraxian main fleet had entered the Sirius Junction. They were mere days from reaching the core worlds. The Council chamber fell silent. Fear was evident on every alien face. We have no choice, said Representative Quarn quietly. We must try something different or face extinction. The vote was unanimous this time. The human strategy was approved with one significant change. The restrictions on the Human Advisory Unit were temporarily suspended. As they left the chamber, Admiral Genthar turned to the 4 humans. You are now authorized to directly coordinate our remaining forces. The fate of the Confederation is in your hands. What's our first move? Kate asked as they hurried toward the command center. Frank looked at his fellow humans, saw the same determination in their eyes that he felt in his heart. We changed the rules of the game. General Ortega nodded grimly. The Vraxians think they know what they're fighting against. They're about to learn differently. They're about to learn why humans were banned from galactic wars, Commander Blackwood added. As they entered the command center, the staff fell silent, watching the humans with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Admiral Genthar stepped aside, giving Frank access to the main command console. Captain Miller, the Admiral said formally. "You have operational control of Confederation forces. What are your orders?" Frank took a deep breath. 50 years of exclusion ended in this moment. He placed his hands on the console and began giving commands that would forever change how the galaxy viewed humanity. The main command center of the Eternal Harmony transformed overnight. Where once stood neat rows of stations with aliens calmly monitoring displays, there was now a hurricane of activity. At the center of this storm stood the 4 humans, issuing orders that shocked the Confederation officers but were obeyed nonetheless. "Disperse the 7th Fleet into 5 separate battle groups," Frank ordered, his fingers moving across the holographic display. "Each group will use a different approach vector to the Proxima system." An Arcturian commander hesitated. "Captain, Miller, dividing our forces goes against every principle of Confederation strategy." "Exactly," Kate said from her station. "The Vraxians have studied your principles. They expect you to gather your forces for a direct confrontation. We won't give them what they expect." General Ortega was working with the communications team, deliberately leaking false intelligence about a massive Confederation fleet gathering at Tau Ceti. "Make sure the encryption is good enough to seem secure, but weak enough that their best codebreakers can crack it within 12 hours, she instructed. Meanwhile, Commander Blackwood coordinated with the Civilian Mining Guild. "I need every mining vessel with explosive charge capability at these coordinates," he said, marking points in the dense nebula between Sirius and Proxima. "They'll be laying specialized minefields." Frank watched the tactical display as their orders were carried out. Small blue markers representing Confederation ships moved into positions no alien commander would have chosen. Mining vessels, represented by green dots, began gathering near the nebula. The trap was being set. Admiral Genthar approached, his violet eyes studying the display. "You're sacrificing the Proxima system," he observed. "We're offering it as bait," Frank corrected. "According to intelligence, the Vraxians believe Proxima contains a major Confederation supply base. In reality, we've already evacuated all civilians and moved any valuable resources," Ortega finished. "But we've left enough evidence to make them think it's a critical target." The Admiral looked troubled. "And once they commit their forces to attacking Proxima?" Blackwood stepped forward with a holographic projector showing detailed technical schematics. "That's when we spring the real trap." He activated the projection, showing a complex device attached to the Proxima star itself. "This is an experimental gravitational technology," he explained. "Originally designed for stellar research, we've modified it to create a localized space-time distortion when triggered. Not powerful enough to damage the star, but enough to catch their entire fleet in a space-time bubble where normal propulsion and weapons won't function properly," Kate finished. "They'll be sitting ducks for our scattered forces to pick off one by one." Admiral Genthar stared at the device. This technology was deemed too dangerous for military application by the Confederation Science Council. "Everything humans do is deemed too dangerous by someone," Frank said quietly. "But right now, dangerous is exactly what we need to be." The next 48 hours were tense. The scattered Confederation ships reported Vraxian scouts probing their positions, testing for weaknesses. The mining vessels completed their work in the nebula, creating invisible killing fields that would activate when triggered remotely. "Tau Ceti deception successful," reported General Ortega, reviewing intercepted Vraxian communications. "They've diverted 3 battle groups to counter our non-existent fleet there. Gravitational device is online and ready," Blackwood added. "Proxima star is showing nominal readings. The device is completely undetectable to their sensors." Frank studied the main display, watching the red markers representing the main Vraxian armada. They were moving exactly as predicted, gathering for what they thought would be a decisive strike against a critical Confederation resource. "They've taken the bait," he said. "They're committing over 60% of their total military strength to the Proxima offensive." Kate looked up from her station. "Our flanking forces are in position. Mining field is armed and ready. We just need them to enter the kill zone." The command center fell silent as they watched the Vraxian fleet advance. It was an impressive sight. Hundreds of warships moving in tight formation toward what they believed was a weakly defended but strategically vital system. They're entering Proxima system now, Kate reported. Estimated time to optimal trap position, 17 minutes. Frank turned to Admiral Genthar. Once we activate the gravitational device, there's no going back. Are you prepared for the consequences? The Admiral's copper skin seemed to darken. What consequences do you foresee beyond defeating the enemy? The level of destruction will be unlike anything the Confederation has seen in centuries of warfare, Frank said honestly. This isn't a battle. It's an ambush designed for maximum enemy casualties. And if we don't do this? The Admiral asked. Then, the Vraxians reach your core worlds within a week, General Ortega replied. Billions die instead of thousands. Admiral Genthar straightened to his full height. Proceed, Captain Miller. The minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness. On the main display, they watched as the Vraxian fleet moved deeper into the Proxima system, spreading out to engage what they thought were defensive positions. They're in optimal position, Kate announced. All ships are within the effect radius. Frank took a deep breath. Commander Blackwood, activate the gravitational device. Blackwood sent the coded signal. For several seconds, nothing happened. Nervous murmurs spread through the command center. Device activation confirmed, Blackwood said, though his voice betrayed uncertainty. There should be visible effects any moment now. Still nothing happened on the display. The Vraxian ships continued their advance unaffected. Did it fail? Admiral Genthar asked, tension evident in his voice. Frank exchanged worried glances with his team. Had their plan failed? Had they sacrificed their position for nothing? Then a sensor operator called out, unusual readings from the Proxima star. Gravitational fluctuations are increasing exponentially. On the display, the space around the Vraxian fleet began to shimmer. The neat formation of red markers started to distort, ships being pulled in different directions as space itself warped around them. It's working, Kate whispered. It's actually working. The command center watched in awe as the space-time distortion expanded, engulfing the entire Vraxian fleet. Ship markers blinked out one after another as vessels were torn apart by forces they had no defense against. Activate the mining field now, Frank ordered. When the few Vraxian ships managed to escape the gravitational trap, they fled directly into the nebula, directly into the waiting minefield. Secondary explosions bloomed. Across the tactical display, begin flanking attacks, Frank commanded. The scattered Confederation forces converged on the disoriented remnants of the once mighty Vraxian armada. Within hours, it was over. Where once had been the pride of the Vraxian Empire, there was now only debris and disabled vessels. Status. Report, Admiral Genthar requested, his voice subdued. Vraxian losses. Approximately 87% of engaged forces, Kate reported. Confederation losses. Minimal. The command center should have erupted in cheers. Instead, a heavy silence fell as the enormity of what they had done sank in. They had not won a battle. They had engineered the almost complete destruction of the enemy fleet. Send to all Confederation forces, Admiral Genthar finally said. Proxima operation successful. Prepare for counteroffensive. He turned to Frank. Captain Miller, the galaxy now understands why humans were banned from war. Frank shook his head. Not yet, he replied. But they will. News of the Proxima victory spread throughout the Confederation like a shockwave. Billions watched the footage of the Vraxian fleet being torn apart by the gravitational distortion, followed by the systematic destruction of the survivors. The reaction was mixed. Many celebrated the salvation from Vraxian conquest, while others were disturbed by the scale of destruction. 3 days after the battle, Frank and his team were summoned to the Confederation Ethics Committee. The large hearing chamber was packed with representatives from dozens of species. Some faces showed gratitude, others displayed clear horror. This hearing will determine whether the human tactics at Proxima violated Confederation warfare conventions, announced Chairperson Vela, a gaseous being contained within a transparent environmental suit. Captain Miller, please explain your rationale for employing such extreme measures. Frank stood, feeling the weight of countless alien eyes upon him. The Vraxian fleet would have reached the core worlds within days. Conventional tactics had failed repeatedly. Billions of civilian lives were at risk. We chose the option that would end the threat decisively, with minimal Confederation casualties. By destroying nearly an entire enemy fleet? Asked Ambassador Lyrixian, his translucent skin now a deep blue with emotion. Such wholesale slaughter hasn't been seen in Confederation space for 8 centuries. Kate Walsh rose to stand beside Frank. With respect, Ambassador, the Vraxians showed no mercy when they conquered the outer systems. They executed prisoners and bombed civilian centers. They understand only one language, force. General Ortega added her voice. This wasn't about revenge. It was about efficiency. The longer a war lasts, the more lives are lost on both sides. The debate raged for hours. Human military philosophy was dissected, questioned, and analyzed by beings who found it alien and disturbing. Frank noticed that although many expressed shock at their methods, none suggested they should have let the Vraxians win. As the hearing reached its conclusion, Admiral Genthar entered the chamber. Silence fell immediately. The committee has requested my perspective, the Admiral said, his voice carrying throughout the room. I authorize the human strategy with full knowledge of its potential consequences. If there is blame to be assigned, it should fall on me. He paused, looking around the chamber, but there should be no blame. Only understanding. The Vraxians left us no choice but to fight. The humans simply showed us how to fight effectively. The committee adjourned to consider their judgment. Frank and his team waited in a small antechamber, the weight of the past days heavy on their shoulders. Do you think they understand yet? Asked Commander Blackwood, breaking the silence. They're starting to, Frank replied. But understanding isn't the same as accepting. Before they could continue, an urgent communication came through. Intercepted messages revealed that the Vraxian High Command was in disarray. Their remaining forces were retreating from multiple fronts, abandoning conquered territories to consolidate. Their defenses, they're vulnerable, Kate said, studying the reports. This is our chance to end the war completely. When the Ethics Committee reconvened, they announced their decision. The human tactics, while extreme, were justified under the circumstances. No sanctions would be imposed. However, they strongly recommended that future operations be conducted with more restraint. Frank immediately requested an emergency council meeting to discuss the Vraxian retreat. In the Grand Council chamber, he presented a bold plan. The Vraxians are retreating to their core systems, he explained, pointing to the tactical display. Their fleet is fractured, their command structure in chaos. We have a unique opportunity to press our advantage and force a complete surrender. Ambassador Lyrixian rose in opposition. Haven't we seen enough destruction? Perhaps we should offer peace terms now, while we have the upper hand. Commander Blackwood shook his head. The Vraxians don't respect mercy. They see it as weakness. If we don't press our advantage, they'll regroup, adapt to our tactics, and attack again. Next time, the gravitational trap won't work. General Ortega stepped forward. We don't need to destroy their civilization. We need to demonstrate that continued aggression is futile. A targeted strike at their remaining military infrastructure would accomplish this with minimal civilian casualties. The council members looked uncertain. After centuries of defensive warfare, the concept of pressing an offensive was foreign to them. Kate addressed their hesitation directly. This is why humans were banned from your wars. Not because we're more violent, but because we understand that in war hesitation costs lives. Admiral Genthar studied the tactical display thoughtfully. What exactly do you propose, Captain Miller? Frank outlined a 3-pronged attack targeting Vraxian military bases, shipyards, and command centers. No civilian targets, no planetary. Bombardment. Surgical strikes with clear objectives. Eliminate their capacity to wage war. The debate was intense. Many council members were uncomfortable with taking the offensive, even against a weakened enemy. Others saw the logic in Frank's argument but feared setting a dangerous precedent. Finally, Representative Quarn spoke up, his avian features solemn. I lost my homeworld to the Vraxians. Billions of my people are dead or enslaved. If we allow the Vraxians to rebuild their forces, they will return. They always have. One by one, other representatives of conquered worlds added their voices. The mood in the chamber shifted. The vote, when it came, was narrow but clear. The council authorized a limited offensive operation designed by the human team, but they added a significant stipulation. Frank, Kate, Ortega, and Blackwood would directly oversee the implementation from the flagship Eternal Harmony. As they left the chamber, Admiral Genthar pulled Frank aside. You realize what this means? The Council is officially suspending the ban on human military participation. Frank nodded. For this operation only. But it's a start. The Admiral's violet eyes studied him carefully. You've changed how this Confederation thinks about warfare. Captain Miller, not everyone is comfortable with that change. War isn't about comfort, Frank replied. It's about survival. And sometimes, survival requires doing the uncomfortable thing. Preparation for the counteroffensive began immediately. For the first time in 50 years, humans would officially lead Confederation forces into battle. The plan was precise, targeting Vraxian military assets while avoiding civilian casualties. As the Eternal Harmony moved into position for the operation, Frank stood on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Kate joined him, her face reflecting the same mix of determination and concern he felt. Do you think they'll ever truly understand us? She asked quietly. Frank considered this. They understand that we're effective. They understand that we can win their wars for them, but do they understand why we fight the way we do? He shook his head. Not yet. Will they? Frank turned from the stars to look at his fellow human. They will after we show them that we're not just good at destruction, we're also good at ending wars. Below them, the massive ship hummed with activity as it prepared for the coming battle. A battle that would either confirm the Confederation's worst fears about humans or reveal a deeper truth they had yet to grasp. 3 months after the battle at Proxima, the war with the Vraxian Empire ended with a formal surrender ceremony aboard the Eternal Harmony. The massive central hall was filled with representatives from all Confederation species. At the front of the hall stood Frank, Kate, General Ortega, and Commander Blackwood, watching as the Vraxian High Command signed the surrender documents. The Vraxian Supreme Commander, a tall, gray-skinned being with 4 arms and a ridge of bony plates along his skull, looked directly at Frank as he placed his mark on the document. You fight like no species we have ever encountered, he said, his translator conveying the words in a flat tone that couldn't hide the mix of fear and respect. Behind them, Frank nodded but said nothing. The Vraxian surrender was unconditional. Their military had been systematically dismantled over the past 3 months, using strategies designed by the human team. Most remarkable to the Confederation observers was the precision of the campaign. Despite the devastating effectiveness of the human tactics, civilian casualties had been kept to a minimum. The final campaign had resulted in the lowest civilian death rate in any major Confederation conflict, though at the cost of significant military losses on both sides. As the ceremony concluded, Admiral Genthar stepped forward. The Confederation owes a great debt to our human allies, he announced. Their strategic insight turned certain defeat into victory. His 4 violet eyes scanned the crowd before settling on the human team. Today, the Confederation Security Council has voted to establish a permanent Human Strategic Advisory Division. Human officers will be integrated into all major military planning departments. Murmurs spread through the hall. This was more than anyone had expected. It was a complete reversal of 50 years of policy. Furthermore, the Admiral continued, the ban on human participation in galactic conflicts is hereby formally rescinded. Frank felt Kate stiffen beside him. This was what they had worked for, what Earth had wanted since joining the Confederation. Yet the Admiral's next words showed that the Confederation had not abandoned all caution. Human military participation will be governed by a new set of guidelines and ethical oversight protocols, Genthar explained. These protocols have been developed in collaboration with Earth's governments to ensure that the unique human approach to warfare is applied responsibly. Later, during the victory celebration, Admiral Genthar presented each member of the human team with the Confederation's highest honor, the Stellar Cross, never before awarded to a human. As the celebration continued around them, the Admiral drew Frank aside to a quiet corner. "There is something I wish to tell you, Captain Miller. Something that has been classified for 50 years. Frank waited, curious. "The ban on human military participation was never about what your people might do to others," Genthar said quietly. "It was about what contact with human military philosophy might do to us." Frank's brow furrowed. "I don't understand." "Most Confederation species evolved as cooperative groups," the Admiral explained. "Even our predator species hunted in packs with clearly defined roles. War, for us, has always been about establishing dominance or defending territory, a larger version of natural competition." He gestured toward the celebration, where aliens of countless species mingled. "But humans, your species evolved differently. You were prey animals who had to become predators to survive. You don't fight to dominate. You fight to end the fight as quickly as possible." Frank began to understand. The ban wasn't about protecting others from us. It was about protecting ourselves from becoming like you, the Admiral confirmed. "Your species approaches conflict with a singularity of purpose that ours lack. You don't seek to win battles, you seek to end wars." Frank thought about this. "And now?" "Now we understand that there are times when your approach is necessary," Genthar said. "The Vraxians forced us to adapt or perish. Thanks to you, we adapted." The conversation stayed with Frank long after the celebration ended. A week later, as the human team prepared to return to Earth to help establish training programs for human officers joining Confederation forces, he shared the Admiral's words with his colleagues. "So we weren't banned because we're too violent," Kate mused. "We were banned because we're too efficient at violence." General Ortega nodded thoughtfully. "It makes sense. The Confederation species fight wars like they're contests, with rules, expectations, and built-in limitations. We fight wars like they're existential threats that need to be eliminated as quickly as possible. Because for most of our history, they were," Commander Blackwood added. "Human warfare evolved from survival, not dominance displays." As their shuttle departed the Eternal Harmony, Frank looked out at the vastness of space. Across the galaxy, alien military academies were beginning to study Earth's military history, from Alexander the Great to guerrilla warfare to modern conflict doctrine. They were learning that humans weren't banned because they were too violent, but because they had mastered the art of ending conflicts quickly and decisively. The galaxy had misjudged humanity's warrior nature. Humans weren't warmongers, they were reluctant warriors who, once committed, fought with a singular purpose: to end the fighting. When the shuttle docked at Earth's orbital station, they were greeted by government officials eager to hear about the new opportunities for humans in Confederation defense. Frank listened to their excited questions about technology sharing and strategic positions, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought about the new doctrine that was already taking shape in Confederation military theory, based on human approaches to conflict, decisive engagement with minimal prolongation. The Confederation was adapting, incorporating human efficiency while tempering it with their own ethical frameworks. That evening, Frank stood on the balcony of his apartment, looking up at the stars. Kate joined him, handing him a drink. "Do you think we've changed them?" she asked. "Yes," Frank replied. "And they've changed us too. Our approach was effective, but their concern for ethical boundaries wasn't wrong." Kate nodded. "So what happens now?" "Now we teach them everything we know about ending wars quickly," Frank said, "and they teach us everything they know about preventing wars altogether." He raised his glass toward the stars, where the Confederation fleet was still visible as tiny points of light. "It wasn't human aggression the galaxy feared," he said quietly. "It was human efficiency." Kate raised her glass as well. "To efficiency, then?" "To peace through efficiency," Frank corrected. "Because that's what humans do best. We find the most direct path to peace, even if that path leads through war. Above them, the stars glittered in a galaxy that now understood exactly why humans had been banned from galactic wars, and why perhaps that ban had been a mistake all along.